Scritti Politti are a band from the UK centred around Welshman Green Gartside. They started as a left-wing punk band called The Against around 1977, and they were renamed to Scritti Politti after the term Scritti Politici, which is Italian, a term for political writing, in tribute to Italian Marxist writer Antonio Gramsci. In 1979, they started planning an album, but that process was paused when Green collapsed on stage with what turned out to be a panic attack. In his convalescence, he re-evaluated his political and musical stance and decided to make pop instead. Since then, they have had 5 albums released. They have had a reasonably large turnover of members, with Green being the only constant member, and they had a break between 1991 and 1999. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the first album by Scritti Politti, and I'm pretty sure it's my first time listening to it. I didn't recognise any of the tracks, but I have heard of the band. They're in my head as one of a whole gamut of 80s bands that were kind of 80s pop. And for some reason, I don't know why, in my head they're connected with Aztec Camera. That's probably not a good connection. So I would describe this as being Blue-Eyed Soul with a twist. Let's try and pick that apart. So Blue-Eyed Soul is kind of I would say, it's often poppy kind of soul, but it's particularly done by white people rather than black people, and but it's using kind of the tropes of soul rather than the tropes of rock. And maybe it's not as full on soul as some, certainly earlier soul, and you kind of think of Motown era soul. So it's kind of soul light, if you like. I'd also potentially use the term pop here, pop soul, but it's not as poppy as you might think. And there are occasional reggae influences in here, and kind of synth pop, in that they're using synthesizers and sometimes drum machines. So as I said, it's less poppy than I assumed it would be from the name. In some ways, it's kind of singer-songwriter, because there's a focus here on the songs rather than on, just kind of a dance and a feeling or something like that. So Green's premise was that pop didn't have to be pat. I'm not quite sure if he put it like that, but this album was, it was the first album for Scritti Politti, but it came after a bit of a history. As I said in the introduction, they used to be a punk band, and he had a re-evaluation both of his political beliefs and of his musical beliefs, as it were, and transitioned from the idea that music has to be punk and rebellious to the idea that actually, if you want to get a message across, you might want to reach a wider audience. If you want to reach a wider audience, it needs to be more musically accessible to a wider audience. And so he came to the conclusion that writing pop with a left-wing message was more effective than writing punk with a left-wing message. So this is the kind of the manifesto that he's got going on behind it. So there's definitely political stuff going on. Apparently the love songs are somewhat satirical as well on here. Let's pick out a couple of tracks at this point. So The Sweetest Girl, which is the last track on the album, sounds basically like a love song. Apparently there's subtext in here. The thing that I find very curious about this album isn't actually much about what you hear, but is the fact that Robert Wyatt is playing keyboards on this. So Robert Wyatt was a member of Soft Machine and was kind of an important mover and shaker in the Canterbury scene, which was part of the prog rock scene. So it's definitely stepping out of that to come into this world. Rockabye Blue, I think it's called, is about being a pop star. I quite like it in terms of its lyrics. Production-wise, it's odd because it's got 2 lots of singing going on at the same time often, and it's a little bit confusing. Also, there's some tuning issues with it. I think generally, the production is weird. It's not very weird, just a little bit weird. It's kind of, I'm going to use the word janky. It's off kilter in some ways. One of the things is that So things have a tendency to maybe be a bit looser than you might expect, but the relationship between the different parts is maybe less strong than in some music. It's certainly not got got that tight feel of some stuff, and it's just the drums seem to be quite low in the mix for this kind of music, which is interesting. The voice is very strong coming through in the mix. So let's talk about the voice. So he's got a really nice tone to his voice, but there's something weird about his singing. So he seems to be unsure at times about the relationship between the key that he's in and the tune that he's singing. And I really can't put my finger on it. Sometimes he's sliding around, so he's not on the note. I don't think it's so much that he's out of tune, but it's kind of it somehow doesn't match with the rest of stuff, to my mind. Presumably, this is deliberate. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of jazz singing in that it's kind of moving around where the tune might be rather than so much hitting a tune. Anyway, it's unusual in some ways. Either that or just the tunes themselves are unusual. Um, so, what do I think overall? It was so tempting, given the name of the album, Songs to Remember, to basically have a tagline, Songs to Forget. Unfortunately, um, I don't think it's that bad, but I wasn't hugely taken with it. I kind of felt it's okay, but I'm not, um, doing cartwheels over it. So yeah, my favourite track is probably the track called Sex, which is a fast, funky jam thing. I quite enjoyed that. Some of the others I was kind of, really just at the sounds, not so much of the lyrics. Or yeah, so lukewarm from me. As always, at this point, I'd love to invite you to tell me what you think of this album. So please do by leaving a comment down below. And that's it from me for now.